Today, we'll be changing the power steering pump on this 1997 GMC Safari. While I'm there, I'll also be replacing the high pressure line that goes from the pump to the hydro boost, the rubber hose that goes from the pump to the upper reservoir. The reason we're replacing this power steering pump is this area has begun to leak. This bolt has an O-ring on the inside that no longer seals. Using an UV flashlight, I shined it under the car, as you can tell in this video. And you don't need to add UV dye because the power steering fluid shows up as bright green. It is evident that the O-ring is no longer sealing. I'm also doing preventive maintenance. This pump is at least 24 years old. Now the cost, you're looking at about $200 minimum. I mean, the bypass tube itself is 60 bucks, but more on that later. The pump, $150. And when you get these parts, make sure you get AC Dalco or GM Genuine. So let's get to it. At this point, I've already removed the air intake and the upper fan shroud. Basically, what you'll need is a large flathead, some hose clamp pliers, 12-inch extension with a 10mm socket. I've blocked off the air intake with a shipping plastic bag and a hairband. And the thermostat housing, I blocked it off with an old bubble wrap and another hairband. The hardest parts of the job are removing the fan shroud nut and the pulley. To get the fan shroud nut off, I took out two 13mm bolts and threaded one back in using this tool, performance tool. From there on, I stuck my 36mm spanner on the nut and hit it to the left with a hammer. With the right tools, the job was done in less than 5 minutes with zero cussing. Remove your belt by moving this tensioner with the 3/8" drive. Now it's time for the fun part. Grab your OEM pulley puller kit and select this tool. You're also going to be using the two clamp halves. If you notice, one of the clamp halves looks like a crescent. Now when you use this against the pulley, you want the full base to be facing the pulley. Now this tool is going to be kissing the pulley. You're not going to screw anything in. And you want the clamp halves to grip against this rim and this rim. So set your tool against the pulley. Put the two clamp halves on the two rims and use your retaining ring to hold everything in place. Now turn this to the right until it becomes hard. Now you grab a 13/16 wrench and you hold that middle screw. And with the 16mm, you're going to turn to the right. Then after about 2 minutes of turning, the pulley finally gives. Remember, you're turning to the right, not to the left. Very interesting tool. Now before you even use this tool, lubricate it with some silicone grease. Next, we'll remove these three 13mm bolts. I'm going to spray some penetrating fluid to make the job easier. I'm also using a 3-inch extension and I have plenty of clearance. At this point, the only thing holding the power steering pump is a 14mm bolt towards the back. Never mind this bolt. Now before I take out the last bolt to remove the power steering pump, I'm going to remove a few lines first. Since I'm going to be replacing the high pressure line from the pump to the hydro boost, I'm going to disconnect it from right here. It's an 18 millimeter. I'm going to disconnect this hose. So I disconnected that dripping line with some hose clamp pliers. It's a rubber hose that goes to it. To the left of that is the 14 millimeter bolt. I got it out with a 6-inch extension. To the right of that, or to the bottom of that, is a connector that we're going to disconnect. The rear 14 millimeter has been removed. There is nothing holding the pump. Careful. And here's our old power steering pump. Transfer this bracket over to the new pump. The spacer is already there, so all you got to do is just transfer it over, the bolts and the metal bracket. You would normally transfer this portion over here, but this is an Evo solenoid, electronic variable orifice. It is no longer used. Basically, at highway speeds, it made your steering wheel much firmer. It is no longer sold, no longer made. To get around that, GM sells this kit. Now this power steering pump already comes with this portion of the kit. So all you really need is this bypass tube. And it tightens onto there. And the high pressure line tightens onto here. The Astro and the Safari rarely use this Evo solenoid. So most likely yours will bolt directly onto the power steering pump or onto one of these similar tubes. Now if your power steering pump doesn't have this bolt, you tighten this on there using a 1-inch socket and torque it down 8 foot-pounds. To remove that bracket, place your power steering pump on a vice grip. Don't have a vice grip, you can always use your fan clutch nut tool. Thread in one of the mounting bolts until it can't go in anymore. Grab an old tire. Sit the power steering pump make sure the fan clutch nut tool is poking towards the outside, and then using a 15 millimeter, you have all the leverage in the world. The new power steering pump is ready to go. Transferred over the bracket. Tighten this connection with the 16 millimeter and this one with the 16 millimeter as well. This calls for 20 pounds of torque, and when you connect it, make sure the line points up. This is also going to be pointing up. Make sure this line is closer to this line due to clearance issues when you put it back on the van. I will not be including this bracket. I will be including the bolt on the other side. I've threaded in the high pressure line to the hydro boost. And you can do this by yourself. Tighten the mounting bolts to 37 foot-pounds. Tighten this connection to the hydro boost with an 18 millimeter line wrench. Moving this hose out of the way helps. Now we're going to add the hose from the power steering reservoir to the pump. Transfer over the gear, and you may need to cut it down to size. Next up, we're going to fit the pulley back onto the power steering pump. Fit this pressure screw onto this second screw on your kit. It's going to screw into your actual power steering pump. From there on, you're going to use a 17 millimeter to turn this to the right while holding on to the top with a 14 millimeter socket. So it's going to look like this. You know you're finished when the pulley and the power steering pump are flush together. Make sure all your hoses are connected, and we're almost done here. Reassemble your belt, torque this pulley bolt down to 18 foot-pounds, and now we move on to putting the fan clutch nut back on. Now your fan clutch nut, thread it on there until it can't spin anymore. Take your 36mm spanner and hit it with the hammer. Now make sure, move the fan clutch to the left, make sure it can unthread. And everything's being reassembled. I added 2 of these. Initially, the power steering pump did not have any fluid, so it whined a little bit. I do not recommend that. I recommend you manually turn the engine to get some fluid in there. To bleed the air out, I turned the steering wheel to the left and to the right 25 times. I didn't jack up the van, I did it while it was parked. I also tried the midi-vac with the GM adapter. Now this GM adapter has poor sealing. It did not want to hold vacuum. Either I have a leak or this is designed badly. I want to say that this is designed badly because there's no dripping on the floor. Overall, everything looks good. The power steering pump is quiet. There's no leaks. So I want to say it's a job complete. Have a good day, you guys.